we have missed our guest, Stephen Yates. He doesn't just live to come on air with us. He actually he does very important things, and he travels all over the world. And he joins us now via Skype. If you're unfamiliar with Mr. Yates, he's the senior fellow at the America First Policy Institute and the chair of the China Policy Initiative. I've got a million questions to ask you, but I'm glad that you've been traveling safely. Good to have you back. Right off the top, explain this to me. So I'm looking at this headline. It's from Reuters, and Reuters even acknowledges that it's weird. And The Guardian had a write-up on this too, and everyone's just very, what is happening here? Very odd. In an unusual move, notes Reuters, China offers to back Hungary in security matters on public security issues, not just trade and investment, but apparently they've been meeting with Viktor Orban, who's the prime minister over there. What is this purpose for? What are they going to help Hungary with?
Well, it's definitely headline worthy of raising eyebrows and scratching your head, because this is not a part of the world that people should be expecting China to be having very much influence. Right. I was in Hungary not that long ago, and it is a country where some investment from China can go a long way, and it does buy some influence. Now, I have no idea what's on offer. At face value, it sounds like Xi Jinping is offering to Orban to have Putin put in the corner and not threaten their sovereignty. So it's, in a way, the usual gangster come by and say, hey, for a little bit of coin, I can make sure that the other bully doesn't come by and break your store window. And so that's what I always have as a first presumption when China's making a real offer. Now, they have made a habit of making a lot of fake offers, whether it's a Middle East peace plan or a peace plan with Ukraine, and a whole host of other things. So the second assumption, besides the sort of mafia don coming around for his peace, is that this is just political bloviation, and they're just stirring the pot. But it's mystifying to me why Orban and Hungary would entertain this.
Yeah, because my first thought was, because it didn't look like it was a Belt and Road Initiative overture. And then I started thinking of all of the secret police offices that China had here in the United States. And it seemed like, is that, because they say with public security issues, is that what they're looking at here?
Well, there is this weird wave of interest in Hungary because of some of their unique laws that look at promoting the family and childbirth and all kinds of other kinds of things.
Expanding welfare, yay!
And that has echoed back a bunch of criticism, some from the right, but a lot from the left, where there's been just absolute unfiltered hatred going back toward Hungary. And we know that when you get really fanatical kind of mind zombies on the left going after you, you can have some public security issues. Yeah. But really in that part of the world, if you have a population that isn't that big and you have an economy relative to some of your neighbors that is not that big, you have to be concerned about organized crime. China knows about that. And you have to be worried about a bully neighbor. And so this is a way for governments in Eastern Europe, if they don't feel like they're getting it from the United States in a way that helps them feel secure, and more importantly, as we have repeatedly emphasized, your supposed neighbors in Europe are not stepping up and doing what their neighborly duty ought to be, then you turn to some of these devils far away under the theory that they're so far away they can't hurt me, and they might help balance against a nearer demon like Russia. Yeah. And so that's kind of the thought process. I think it's fraught with peril, but you can't blame too many people for looking to Washington and saying, all we have is hot air coming out of D.C. right now, and all the money and materials going to Ukraine, so the rest of us are on our own.
Yeah, talking with our very good friend Stephen Yates, who joins us very regularly. You mentioned, and I'm going to get to Russia and the Navalny death, the accidental death. Apparently he had bruises all over himself, and I guess they were trying to get his body. It's just a weird, he was killed. Obviously the Putin regime had him killed. What gets me about all of this, and I'm sure that you've seen this, I watched, Tucker Carlson's a friend of mine, I watched his interview with Putin, and what I found odd in the wake of that was the praise from certain people that identify as being on the right. I tend to joke and say that these people think that politics began the day that they were born. But they think that like people like Putin and even to an extent Xi Jinping are somehow defenders of traditional values, but yet they persecute Christians. I mean, Navalny was a professed Christian. Xi Jinping persecutes Christians, to say nothing of the Uyghurs. I'm trying to figure out how that gets lost in the translation of they stand for traditional values, and that gets like represented here in the United States as a good thing.
Yeah, well, I do think that there is a difference between Russian tradition and culture and Chinese tradition and culture that might make a little bit of difference in this equation. But overall, you're still dealing with aggressors who are about control, not freedom. And whatever respect they have for an independent institution of religion, faith, family, what have you, they've certainly proven that they're willing to step over all of those boundaries when their political and their self-defined national interests are at play. So I think we have to look at people who go to the Russia example and say, why are we going overboard in demonizing and fighting with Russia when we have a civilizational threat coming from China that is actually on our shores? And shouldn't we be focused on other things? And every bit of material that's spent on this, as just is a fact of life, is taken away from meeting other challenges. I'm open to that kind of an argument because life isn't free. We don't have unlimited capacity, and multitasking is a lie. But I don't share the idea of holding up these other kinds of people. I favor someone like Tucker doing an interview. I favor criticizing these people when they kill their political opponents. I do think that I care a lot more about political opponents being jailed and killed in the United States than I do about those overseas. Maybe that makes me a bad person in some regards, but I think it's important not to overlook that. There's a large swath of our political culture that goes to high church about things far away, and they look right past the graveyard in the United States. And I think that's a real massive problem we have in this moment, as a lot of our authors in our commentariat like to say.
I agree. And I made this point last week, and I got some pushback from some folks on the left because I thought you're very upset over Alexei Navalny, but where were you on the people who were detained on January 6th who didn't even go into the Capitol and who were arrested? Right. Or people who went in and maybe they stood in the rotunda in between the velvet ropes, which I still to this day find entertaining, that they didn't go rogue wild and they literally all orderly filed. It's all on video. They orderly filed into the rotunda. I mean, yes, the people who did damages, etc., they've been prosecuted. But the other people who saw security guards opening the door and walked in, there are people who've been detained for months, people who have been given harsher sentences than like serious predators, say, out in California or up in New York. So how is that any different, except maybe, they're not being poisoned or beaten to death while they're detained? How is that on its face, though, a different first step from what began with Navalny?
Right. They can both be wrong. There doesn't have to be one right and one wrong, and neither justifies the other. But the one that's happening here, done by our government to our own people, should bother us more. And we should get our own house in order first. I think that's kind of the America First ethos that a lot of people have kind of drawn their attention to. You can pick your flavor or what have you, but I think people are weary about the preachers talking about the far away. It matters to a degree. Injustice elsewhere does affect us in some way, but injustice right here and now in our own country against our own people. I mean, I care about Americans getting killed by fentanyl cartels, others, a lot more than I do about civil strife in other parts of the world, even the places I know. And I understand if other Americans feel similarly. It's my job to make sure that we take care of America. And then when we have extra capacity, work with reliable partners to help keep those problems far from our shores.
I think that's a great point. Talking with our friend Stephen Yates. So Chinese fishing vessels are now being accused of pumping cyanide into international waters. This is what the Philippines Fishing Authority has said. Not international waters, I should say, contested waters, because they have the South Sea, and then they are trying to say that it's theirs. They have their little man-made island that they put into it as like their flag in the water. I mean, you're intentionally destroying commercial enterprise at that point. I mean, I just think that this is something that like the Jefferson went after the Barbary pirates for. This is explain the what is going to happen over this, because to me it seems like that's a massive escalation.
It is an escalation, but first, I can't get past that headline and start asking, where are the high priesthood of the green universe when the CCP is obviously and verifiably poisoning the world? And yet your salvation comes from a manufacturing platform driven almost entirely by these same people who have no sense of quality control, don't care about your green universe. And so there's that whole part. You'd think there would just be a little bit of criticism about bad China on some of this and maybe rallying to some of the victims in Asia. But on geostrategic terms, I mean, no one has really provoked China. This is all Xi Jinping picking fights. Now, he's doing it because he can. America's weak. The rest of the world is confused. All of that. And that's by our choice and our mistakes. That can change. But it's also because he has real problems at home. He has all kinds of things happening there that are difficult pressures, and they need to have these distractions. That's why I think we're in a dangerous period. We've talked about this a number of times. A lot of people talk about big bad China overcoming America. That is a challenge in some theory. That's not today, and it's not for near decades. But today, a fragile, failing China is dangerous. And I think that's some of the symptoms that are getting them to pick on the Philippines, because we've joked in the past about why someone picks on Canada. Other than their crazy prime minister, I don't know why they do. Yeah. But picking on the Philippines is another one of those. If you're picking a fight, borderline a war with the Philippines, odds are you're the problem.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem as though that China in its and I think that your point is often missed by a lot of people who talk about this, whether it's on cable news or in editorials, decades out, because China has their own issues, much like Russia has their issues. And I still don't think that a one weakened entity would help prop up another weakened entity, and then together they could become one stronger entity, because I think there's too many tyrant egos at play there, and too many overbearing governments that would allow they wouldn't want to have that kind of joint venture.
No, I mean, it's a race to the bottom in a certain sense. So I think we have this opportunity with Xi Jinping being unambiguously aggressive and wrong. You would think it would be a wake-up call to the doctrinaire Europeans, Asians, and Americans.
But what role does India play in this? I mean, what you made the point before that we should be doing more to become better friends with India. They've already beaten China in population. They're not friends with China. Russia's been trying to saddle up to them. I mean, it seems like they could play an outsized role in this.
They could. We just have to have realistic expectations. We definitely could do more, should do more. Our supply chains would be safer relying more there than they are inside the People's Republic of China. Just have to always remember, in dealing with India, like some other parts of the world, there is only one version of time: soon and very soon. And I can't tell you what they mean. You just don't want to be stuck in soon.
Ooh,
and so things can move slowly in that relationship, but we should be pushing in that direction. We spent 40 to 50 years on this mistaken bet, making China our sole source manufacturing platform for way too many things. We've got to change that. Faster than that 50 years, India should be a part of that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Stephen Yates, always appreciate it. You can find him on X at YatesComms, 2 M's. Thank you so much for your time. Always enjoy talking with you. We'll talk with you again soon. Take care.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.